women have been protesting about more inclusivity, about their rights. We know women, first-hand experience, women are too frightened to come out of their homes. They're too frightened to go to the workplace if they're allowed at all. Do you support their calls?
I feel very strongly that it's a mistake to think that someone from outside will give Afghan women rights. Afghan women are strong. Give them time, they will get their rights.
Should women have access to the same roles in public and in private life?
Of course, women should have the potential in life. The society.
So you won't be able to support a Taliban government that doesn't allow that? Is that what you're telling me?
No. What I'm saying is that you cannot impose women's rights from abroad.
From women's rights or lack thereof in Afghanistan to Pakistan's national security and its current relations with the US, which you may find surprising given the Prime Minister's very strong comments about what he perceives to be American ignorance about this region. That full interview will be online after this show. Well, joining me now is Fahd Hussain, editor and columnist for the Dawn newspaper here in Islamabad. And in an article last month, he wrote, and I quote, "Over the years, the Pakistani state has garnered a number of failures, but none, as it turns out today, as glaring and as painful. Inability, incapacity, incompetence in telling its own story. This failure is yet again on display, and the state is clueless how to address it." You don't hold back, sir. Is it the narrative, is it the message, or is it actually the policy that is a problem here? Explain what you meant.
Well, thank you. See, I think the policy has changed over the years. Pakistan has made a lot of mistakes in the past decades, and we've paid for it, in a number of ways. Not only the governments, but the people, the society. In the 80s, I was growing up, so I know, how the society changed, radicalization, drugs, gun running, etc., etc. So I think Pakistan has learned from those times, and now, second time when all of this is happening, I do believe that, whatever I've spoken to people in positions of decision making, there is a realization that this time around we need to act differently, and I believe we are, but we've got a bad repute, and that's where my point came in what you just quoted. My point was that even when Pakistan is trying to do the right thing, it is being accused of crimes that it may have done decades ago. And that change, Pakistan is not being able to communicate the present context, the changed environment, and the new focus.
This goes all the way to the top, of course, because Imran Khan and I talked today about why he believed it was that the US president hasn't called their major non-NATO ally that sits next door to a country that the US has been involved in a war for 20 years. He hasn't called him during this crisis. Joe Biden hasn't called the Prime Minister since he took office. And I put it to the Prime Minister, does he believe that is a snub, a whip, as it were, to say, listen, you've been supporting the Taliban, according to the US. These Taliban have killed, or terrorists have killed, US troops, so you're not getting that call. It goes right to the top, doesn't it?
It does, but here's the irony. Pakistan is being accused of doing those things which it had done in the past and paid for it. But strangely and ironically, I think the US is repeating the mistakes that it did in the early 90s when it walked away. Pakistan is a key player right now. It is the most affected country and has the most to lose. So I think ignoring Pakistan at this particular point, I think it reeks of not only short-sightedness, but a little loss of memory also.
I've been speaking to people here and around the world who say there's a really interesting dynamic between Pakistan and China at present, just as there is such rocky relations between Beijing and Washington. So Pakistan has a good and open dialogue with China. Given the deterioration in relations between here and Washington, is Pakistan getting pushed into China's arms at this point? And if so, is that a problem? Let me just run you some sound. I put that question to the Prime Minister. Just hold on.
Our relationship with China goes back 70 years. It's a very strong relationship. It was Pakistan which opened the doors of the US to China in 1970 when Dr. Henry Kissinger was introduced to China, or we were the go-between. So, I mean, our China relationship is not dependent on what it is with US. We would like a normal relationship with the US, I repeat, like it has with India.
There are folks in Washington who will say, is Pakistan taking sides? Is it choosing for its future economic stability?
I think it is framing the whole thing. Pakistan doesn't need to and shouldn't choose. I think it requires China. It is an old, long-standing, solid relationship and is translating into solid economic. So I think Pakistan at the highest level really wants to balance this relationship. You know, if you look at it from Pakistan's point of view, it doesn't make sense to take sides between two superpowers, where in this region both are invested, both have their interests, and both can have a solid framing Pakistan in. And if somebody in the US or somewhere else is trying to push Pakistan or color Pakistan.
Were you interested to hear, you may have heard it before, the Prime Minister suggests that what he's looking for out of the relationship with Washington going forward is not that Pakistan is regarded as a gun for hire, as he suggested, but he wants a more multi-layered relationship. And he said, like that of China. Your thoughts?
China is a good example for Pakistan.
Sorry. Go on.
Okay. Well, I mean, India, of course, kind of a relationship with the US. With Pakistan, the relationship has been rocky, very close at some points and very transactional at other points. But at this particular moment, if you were somebody in Washington, if you were somebody sitting in the White House and looking towards this side, you would see that Afghanistan is now could beyond the region. And therefore, if the world has to stabilize Afghanistan, which we must, then Pakistan is the best gateway to go into that problem and solve it. My point is, it is not time to fix the blame. It is time to fix the situation. And Pakistan is part of that.
Imran Khan has said he wants to be part of the solution for peace, not the conflict going forward. We will see how the US deals with what it describes as its reassessing of its relationship with Pakistan. You will, I know, cover that in the job that you do, and so will I. Thank you very much indeed for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Washington now, where a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing is underway. Senators are examining an Inspector General's report handle investigations into former USA gymnastics doctor Larry Nassar. And I just want you to get a listen in as some of the American gymnasts are testifying.
And my question basically to the panel, anyone who cares to, what would you say to other young athletes who may be suffering in silence or wrestling with the decision about whether to speak out? Ms. Reisman?
Yeah. The first thing that I would want to say to anybody that's watching this that's suffering in silence or has been through something really traumatic is that I support them.